Payment certificates. Payment certificates are generated after agreeing to pay a subcontractor's purchase invoice. Now, there's two types of payment certificate. One where you pay the full invoice value to the subcontractor, and the other where you have to split out the labour and materials to be able to deduct a percentage of the labour that your company will pay to HMRC on behalf of the subcontractor. And this is governed by the CIS type of the subcontractor. So the two types are a gross rate where you pay the full invoice payment to the subcontractor, or the other where the CIS is either SR standard rate or HR higher rate. And this is where you have to split the materials and labour in order to calculate a percentage of CIS tax from the labour to pay to HMRC. The other complication is reverse charge VAT. So if your subcontractor is registered for VAT and also as reverse charge, now they'll have to indicate this on their invoice to you. You will have to deduct the VAT amount from their payment and then pay this to HMRC on their behalf. So if we look at the two types of payment certificate, firstly, if we look at a gross rate, the simpler of the two, where the full invoice payment will be made to the subcontractor. So the subcontractor has sent an invoice for £300. So this certificate will be for £300. We're not holding any retention. We then add in our VAT, so we have a subtotal of £360. There's no CIS tax and no reverse charge VAT. So we're authorising our accounts to pay the subcontractor £360. There's no previous certificates against this, so the balance due is £360. Now, if we look at one where we have to split out for labour and materials. So the subcontractor has sent an invoice in for £500. So the certificate is for 500. We're not holding any retention. And we have a VAT addition of £100. So we have a subtotal of £600. But because they're registered CIS type standard rate, we have to split out the labour value and the material value so we can calculate the CIS tax at 20% of our labour value, which is £60. To further complicate things, they're registered as reverse charge VAT. So although we've added in the VAT at that point, we then have to take it out at this point because we're only going to pay the subcontractor £440 of his invoice value of 500. That's because we're paying £60 of his CIS tax to HMRC, and we're also paying £100 of the VAT to HMRC as well. Again, there's been no previous certificates, so the amount due is the £440. Now, if the subcontractor was to send in a second invoice amount, so we now have another invoice for £600. We have a certificate value of 1,100. So that's all the invoices that the subcontractor submitted to date. We then take off any previous certificate. So our last certificate was of 500. So we have a balance of £600. So this balance here of £600 should match the invoice for this request for payment. So we then go through the same process before, any retentions being held, adding on our VAT, taking off our CIS tax at 20%, reversing our VAT. So we have a total to pay the contractor of £990. Now, because we've already paid him an amount of 440 on our last certificate, we only have a balance to pay for him of 550. So if we look at a third example of that, so we have a third invoice from our subcontractor. This time it's £350. We have a total certificate value of 1,450. That's all the invoices to date, less the previous certificate, which was for 1,100. So the balance due on this certificate is £350. So that 350 will match our last invoice of 350. So again, we go through the same process as before, adding on our VAT to give us a subtotal. We then have our CIS tax off our labour, and then we have our reverse charge VAT. So we have a total that we're due to pay the subcontractor. Because we've already paid him 990 on previous certificates, we only have a balance to pay of 330 on this certificate. Okay, so let's look at how we generate a payment certificate from Contractcontroller. So I need to go to Departments, Accounts, Purchases, and enter List Purchase Invoice. I then need to locate the purchase order that we're doing the purchase invoice against. So if I select Purchase Order 108 and then register a purchase invoice. So here we can see that we've already had one invoice for £300 and we've actually paid that to date. So we have an outstanding balance of £255.56 due against this purchase order. So let's assume that we got that same value on the invoice from our subcontractor. And so we enter that in with this invoice number, the payment date, our accounts reference, date that we're going to pay it, and the value that we're going to pay. So it's 225.56. So we can now see that we're scheduled to pay £525.56 against our original purchase order value of £525.56, which is shown there. Now I need to say that I'm going to pay that, so I can either enter it in manually there, or because I've just got a balance to pay, I can click the automatically enter the balance to pay, and the system will enter that in for me. I then say process payment, and there's no more invoices due. I can register that the work's now being completed, so okay. And now this takes me to the payment certificate. Now, because this is a gross rate payment certificate, I don't have to split the labour value, so the system won't allow me to do that. It takes care of all the maths for me. So it's saying this certificate is 525, because that's the value of all the invoices we've had, less our previous certificate, which was 300. So the balance to pay is our 225.56, which is in fact this invoice here. So we then go through to our subtotals, adding in the VAT, so the amount we're going to pay the subcontractor. So the overall amount is 630.67, but we've already paid 360. Obviously, that's the £300 plus VAT. So our balance to pay is the 270.67. So I then simply say issue certificate, and then we select to print that. And I just need to change my screen share. So you can now see the payment certificate, this certificate, the last certificate, and the balance to pay. So once printed, the system will then return to the screen where we can either enter another purchase order or click Finished to come back to our dashboard. So now if I want to add another purchase invoice to the invoices that we were doing earlier, where we're having to take the CIS tax. So I go to Departments, Accounts, Purchases, enter List Purchase Invoice, enter the purchase order, so 107, register the purchase invoice. So you can see here, these are my previous invoices that we've received against our purchase order. So we can see the purchase order value was 2820. We've paid 1950 to date, so we have an outstanding amount of 870. So let's say we have another invoice for £200. So I enter a new invoice, to their invoice number, when we're going to pay it, our accounts reference. We'll pay it on the 7th. We're going to pay another £200. So I can't actually automatically pay the balance to pay because we don't have enough. So here I just need to click on there and say I'm going to pay £200. I then process payment, but more invoices are expected. So we then get the payment certificate. So we have this invoice value of £200, and this is where I have to say what the labour value of this invoice is, and the system will calculate the material value. So let's say that the labour is 150. The system will work out the materials is 50. It'll then work out our total labour value and our total material value so that it can work out the 20% CIS tax at 20% of the total labour value. So this certificate, i.e. the value of all the invoices we've received to date, less the CIS tax on the labour, less our reverse charge VAT. So the amount due to be paid to the contractor is 1910. But then we have to take off any previous payments that we've already made to the subcontractor to give us our balance. So our balance due to pay is £170. So we then issue that certificate. Before I issue that certificate, you do have an area for notes. So if you want to make some notes on that certificate for the subcontractor, you can simply put whatever you want in here. So if I just put notes here, you'll see that carried forward onto the certificate. So I issue the certificate. I'll preview on screen, and I need to change my screen share. So I just change that to the payment certificate. So you can see now it's keeping a tally of all the invoices that we've received from them, our total certificate value, i.e. this certificate, less our previous certificate, thus giving us the balance due. So I mentioned earlier, this balance here of £200, which is the certificate value, should match your last invoice of £200. And you can see here the notes that we typed in will be entered onto this payment certificate. So once we've completed that, we go back to our screen where we can register more purchase invoices, and I can simply say finished, and that will take me back to my dashboard. If you wanted to view a payment certificate you've already issued, or indeed print another copy of that, if you go to Departments and Production, and then go to Purchase Orders and View List Purchase Order, locate the purchase order that the payment certificates are for. So if I type in Purchase Order 107, and then double click to view the purchase order, we can see instantly all the purchase invoices that we've received. Now to view the payment certificates, just click the payment certificate button, and that will list all the payment certificates that have been issued, and then you can just double click on the payment certificate that you want to look, and you can print a copy of that if you wanted to. So very easy to go back and look at previous payment certificates that have been issued to the subcontractor. If for any reason you need to delete a payment certificate, now a payment certificate should only be deleted if it hasn't been issued to your accounts department, because obviously they could well have paid the subcontractor. But if you've generated one, you think, no, that's not right, I need to delete it and start again. Just go to Departments, Accounts, and then go to Purchases, and then go to Delete Payment Certificate. Enter in the purchase order number, and then enter the certificate number that you wish to delete. Now, if I enter in certificate number 3, the system won't allow me to do that because I can't delete a certificate out of sequence. Because obviously if I deleted certificate 3 out of the 5, they wouldn't balance up. The subsequent payment certificates that were generated may not balance to that. So you have to start at the last one that was issued and delete from the latest back to the one that you want to delete. So if I put in purchase payment certificate number 5, click continue, it then gives me a view screen, and then I can click delete if I wish to delete that. It will ask, are you sure you wish to delete it? I won't do that at this point. But that's the way to remove your payment certificates should you need to.